My name is Lee Brown. I'm a Cherokee. I was born for the Wolf Clan, and my name and my language is Seinu Steve. And I moved to British Columbia in 1979 to help develop the first Native healing center in the province called Round Lake, a Native Treatment Center. It comes from a dream of an Okanagan man, and the treatment center is on the Okanagan First Nations called OKIB, Okanagan Indian Band. And I would listen to some really moving stories this morning, and I want to make a couple comments. I listened to this morning, perhaps some of you did as well, Chief Bobby Joseph. I listened to Brandy Moran, and one of the things that Chief Joseph talked about was, returning to the view of women as sacred. So one of the wonderful jobs I had in my life, the last job before I retired from the University of British Columbia, was directing an institute called the Institute of Aboriginal Health. And part of that job was having a garden at UBC Farm. The University of British Columbia is the only university in North America that has a farm that is in relationship with the Indigenous population of that territory, which in the case of UBC is the Musqueam First Nation. And one of the things I did at that farm is I brought youth in care to the farm for a 32-week program, learning how to plant, learning how to harvest, learning how to make medicines. And when Bobby Joseph was talking about sacredness, it reminded me of the story I sometimes told to the youth. And and the story is that one of the things I do is Tai Chi. And sometimes when I'm doing Tai Chi, I have a Buddhist meditation tape, and it's just two songs. The first one was in Mandarin. And sometimes when people are visiting me and would be listening to the tape, and the second song comes on, and I let it play for a while, then I say to them, "Do you understand what is being said?" And they say, "No, I don't speak Chinese." And I would say, "Listen more carefully." And they'll say, "No, I can't understand it." And then I would share with them that it is not in Chinese, it's in English with a heavy accent. Listen more carefully. And they begin to realize that the song is saying, "One more time, leaf fall down. One more time, leaf fall down." And once they have heard it in English, they will never be able to not hear it. And it's the same with sacredness. When I brought the young people to the farm and trying to get them to, during the course of their program, to see the sacredness in things. Once you have seen the sacredness in things, you cannot not see it. Once you've seen the sacredness in one thing, you'll see the sacrednesses in all things. And once you've seen the sacredness in all things, you see the sacredness in yourself. And once you've seen the sacredness in yourself, you see the sacredness in everyone and all others. And once you see the sacredness in all others, money won't be as important to you. But until you've seen the sacredness, the incredible sacredness of the world we're living in, and of the men and women in this world, until you've seen that sacredness, the world is just a place of resources. So I'm very thankful to be here. I was invited a number of years ago to participate as an elder in some of the early meetings of the Moose Hide campaign. I participated with another elder named J.C. Lucas from the Nuu-chah-nulth people here on Vancouver Island. And I was so inspired with the story this morning of Brandy Moran, who told her story. And I'm not going to tell my whole story, but it's very similar. I think a lot of us have similar stories. I was born in the 1940s, and I inherited the violence of World War II, and I inherited the violence of the Korean War because my dad was a soldier in the European theater, and he was also a soldier in the Korean War. He was one of the few survivors of the Battle of the Chosin Reservoir. His unit was wiped out. There was only 3 survivors. He was one. He engaged in the hand-to-hand combat for 5 days and nights to live, fighting people that he really didn't want to fight, people that he was predisposed to like. And so he brought that violence home, and I grew up in violence. I was sharing this morning that I think it was around 1952 when I was a young man, I was a child. And I remember the exact moment. I can remember the exact place I was in my house when I said to myself, I don't like the violence. You know, I don't want to be part of this. And that's why I'm so happy about being part of the Moose Hide campaign. It's something that I have hoped for a long time. And growing up in an alcoholic home, and I'm a recovering alcoholic myself. I have 48 years sobriety. And I went to my first AA meeting 58 years ago. So if I went to my first meeting 58 years ago and I've been sober 48 years, and you see it took me 10 years to catch on. So I am in fact a slow learner. But anyway, my father took me to my first AA meeting, and as a child growing up in an alcoholic home, I suffered from malnutrition. And I found myself limping to school in grade 7. I was losing the use of my legs from alcoholism and malnutrition, the diseases of malnutrition. I had encountered rheumatic fever. It came time to go back to school in 8th grade. I didn't go. I laid in the back room of our house. I laid there for over a year. And over a year, you know, I never spoke about this experience till I came to the Healing Center in 1979, and they sent me to a wonderful workshop with a beautiful lady.
Hi, my name's Deborah. Could you contact me at 403-826-2000? Thank you.
Okay. And the Healing Center sent me to a workshop with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. And Elizabeth Kubler-Ross encouraged me to share my story and my death and dying experience at age 12 from malnutrition. And I made the journey to the spiritual world. And I came back with one thought when I was, and I was sent back. I didn't want to come back. Who would want to come back to the situation I was in? My body was less than 50 pounds. My hair was falling out. My teeth were breaking off at the gums. Abscesses were growing up in my mouth like mushrooms, and I didn't know what to do with them. So I took an old Gillette Blue Blade and cut the abscesses out of my mouth with a razor blade for 6 years until I could get to a dentist and have those teeth removed, which are bothering me today because eventually I had a bridge, and on the way down here, my bridge came out, and my teeth have been a difficulty for me all my life. But when I came back with this thought: what would it take to be healthy? What would it take to be a healthy human being? How can I regain my health? What would it take for my family to be healthy? What would it take for my community to return to health? What would it take for the human beings to get healthy again? You know, I'm fortunate to live in Canada, which has an incredible medical system. We spend billions of dollars on our medical system. And it is a wonderful medical system. I'm not bad-mouthing it, but the fact is we're getting sicker. There's more diabetes, there's more arthritis, there's more cancer. Cancer rates are going up among both native and non-native populations. And so I spent my life dedicated to health and healing, and I've given it a lot of thought. And as a director of the Institute for Aboriginal Health, I gave a lot of talks to doctors' organizations, to medical organizations, to Vancouver Coastal Health, to nurses' organizations. I used to give talks at the medical school and the School of Nursing and the School of Midwifery. And in all these talks, I said to people, the doctors and nurses I talked to, our elders tell us that at one time we had no major illness as we have it now. We had no major illness as we have it now. And you know, I was retired a few years, but it dawned on me that not one doctor or not one nurse ever said to me, how did the Native people do that? You know, how did that happen? How did we have a continent full of healthy people? And so I spent my life studying health, and I'm so so glad to be involved in this organization. And as Raven Lacerte was speaking this morning and talking about, making a place safe for women, I remembered a prophecy that I heard when I was a young man. I was a student of Thomas Binyaka, the Hopi elder, who was a keeper of prophecy for the Hopi nation, and many other elders. And I used to go to gatherings as a teenager, called the White Roots of Peace gatherings, which were gatherings of Native elders that knew the prophecies and knew the teachings. I listened carefully. And one of the prophecies is that the day will come when a beautiful woman will be able to walk across Turtle Island without fear of any harm. Imagine that. And I just realized this morning as I was listening to Raven Lacerte and Chief Bobby Joseph and other people speaking, that this movement here, the Moose Hide campaign, is a big part of the fulfillment of that prophecy. Knowing the prophecies and one of the big prophesized events that we had, that many tribes have a version of this prophecy, is the prophecy of the eagle landing on the moon. Some tribes say the eagle will circle the moon and return. Some tribes say the eagle will fly its highest in its night. Some tribes say the eagle will land on the moon. And when the eagle landed on the moon, that little spaceship, it was actually called something else. At the very last minute, they changed the name to the Eagle. And when that eagle landed, I thought, oh, the long, hard time is over, and we're beginning the new time for Native people. It was 1969. I was a student at the University of Washington in Seattle. I was really heavily involved in the Native community. My healing path for myself, that when I came back from my journey at age 12 and I was looking around for health as a teenager, I came to believe that if I could become a singer in the Native traditions, I could regain my health. And so I petitioned the elders to become a singer, and I did become a singer. And I had two major singing teachers in my life. One was a Kiowa man named John Mhula, and his wife was a Kiowa as well. And one was a Dakota man from Fort Peck Reservation named Dale Running Bear. His wife was actually from British Columbia. And when the eagle landed on the moon, I thought, wow, and I started looking around, and it didn't seem like anything was happening, and that it seemed like much was changing, really. And the 70s came and went, and the 80s came and went. And, I was wondering about, the change. But I think you might agree with me. And listening to Chief Bobby Joseph, he reminded me of this morning, and that's why I'm not actually into my talk yet. I'm just responding to the speakers I've heard, the wonderful speakers. That Chief Bobby Joseph used the term that there's been a shift, with regard to Indigenous people, not only in Canada, but all around the world, as healers and helpers of the earth itself. I often have used the term, the tide has turned. The last 5 or 6, maybe 5 to 10 years, you can really feel it. And this last year, when they had that World Earth Environmental Conference, and the earth is a woman. We're talking about violence against women. We're talking about violence against the earth as well. When they had that big earth conference this last year, and they talked about Native people being appointed as keepers of the land, I thought, wow, that's another huge point, and the tide is turning. And so is the Moose Hide campaign. So I want to begin by saying that my understanding, there's many different types of fasting. The two main ones that I have used in my life are spiritual fasting and health fasting. And in a spiritual fast, we do not drink water. We do not eat food. We generally go up on the mountain. We generally establish an altar on the mountain, usually under the help of an elder. And we sit in that altar for 4 days and nights without food and water. I've done that a number of times in my life. And then there's health fasting, when we're not eating food, but we are maybe drinking water or drinking a tea or a broth, medicine broth that is healthy. And one of the things before we had antibiotics that the Cherokees used to do was they would boil carrots, celery, and potatoes. And during a fast or during a sickness, drink that water, not eat the food itself, but drink the water, because there is a kind of fasting that's healing. And thinking about the fast that we're doing today, I am fasting except for the fact that I'm drinking water to help me talk. I think it's both a spiritual and a healing fast. It's both, and the fasting that we're doing, when we're fasting in both time and space. This may seem like a little abstract, but you know, we exist in circles of time. And the elders that I knew, and this teaching I'm going to share with you is from the oral tradition. It's not something I read in a book. Everything I'm going to share with you today is from elders and not from books. From the elders I knew, and I had a teacher and that taught me about the sweat and the pipe and those kinds of ways. His name was Don Matheson, and he understood that there was 4 cycles of time. And the reason this is important because it relates to another thing that was Chief Bobby Joseph said this morning about calling men to realize the sacredness of women, you know, and I would add calling men to realize the sacredness of men, and calling women to realize the sacredness of men. We have to realize that we are sacred beings. That, as I said, once you see the sacredness in one person, you will see the sacredness in all people, if you've truly seen it. But we exist in the day. The day has 4 parts. Right now we're approaching noon. One of the parts of the day is sunrise to noon. One of the parts of the day is noon to sunset. One of the parts of the day is sunset to midnight. And the 4th part of the day is midnight to sunrise. And the reason this is important in terms of violence is that one of the important teachings we have of the day is that the evening is time for it. It's time to have a good time. It's time for storytelling. It's time for dancing. And another important teaching of the day is that in the time of midnight to sunrise, it's a time of silence. It is best, if you want to avoid violence in your personal life, to not speak after midnight. You don't have to do this. I'll say the same thing to you I told to my children. You don't have to do anything. Don't ever let somebody tell you have to do this or you have to do that. But you can do, you know, what you choose to do and what you want to do. And in case of my girls who happen to be Native girls, I said to them, you don't have to do anything because you're Native. Don't let people tell you that. But because you're Native, you can do certain things if you want to do them. So we exist in that day, and it's very important. That one of the teachings that goes along with the day is that all major decisions about our personal lives should be made between sunrise and noon. Never make a decision about your life when the sun is down. You know, make the decision the next sunrise. A decision can wait. Noon to sunset is a good time to talk about things, gather information, do some research on Google if you've got, you know, maybe you're looking for a new job or something. But the decision is made between sunrise and noon, and that is best for your life. We also exist in the time of the moon, the cycle of the moon. The important thing about the cycle of the moon, of course, is that it's a cycle of the woman's body. Woman's body moves with Grandmother Moon. So we say Grandmother Moon is the teacher of women. But here's something, and I'm addressing the men here now, respectfully, with respect to each and every one of you, I'm addressing you. The cycle of the sun, which has 4 parts, the 4 seasons. The cycle of the moon has 4 parts, the 4 parts of the moon: new moon, quarter moon, full moon, 3/4 moon. The cycle of the sun is the cycle of the man's body. Why is this important? Because every man and every woman's cycle is different. A woman has to study her cycle to understand herself and her life. A man has to study his cycle. I studied mine. You know, you might remember when you were in 3rd grade that 1 to 10 was on a line. And if 1 to 10 is on a line, and then you're 20 years old, and that's okay, and then 30, then 40, then you're 50, then you're 60, and now I'm past 70, and I'm looking at 80, it starts to get scary because you go on down that line. But if you look at it like this, I'm 1, I go around the first circle of my life. I'm 2, I go around the next circle of my life. I'm on my 76th circle of my life now. I know my circle pretty good. I know my cycle. I know that when the sun comes, the men's cycle begins on December 21st. The woman's cycle begins on the new moon. The woman's cycle peaks on the full moon. The men's cycle peaks on June 21st. We're coming to that. It's a time when a lot of tribes have sacred dances. The sun dances sometimes on June 21st. It's an important time. On June 21st, the sun enters the house of the north, and they say it dances on the northern horizon, at the north end of the eastern horizon, at the north end of the good red road that appears just before the sun comes up. The sun dances for 4 days, from June 21st to June 25th. On December 21st, the sun enters the house of the south. It dances in the house of the south from December 21st to December 25th. That's the best time to make prayers for men. Of course, you can pray for men anytime, but the best time to make a prayer for a man is when the sun is in the house of the south, so that when the sun gets to the house of the north, that the man will be stable. And because this is a time of the year for many men, and for myself included, where it's really possible to do stupid things because our energy is really peaking. We're going to peak here in June 21st pretty soon. Next month, our energy is going to peak. As soon as that sun comes out of the house of the south and house of the north and starts heading south, we feel a letdown. And when it gets across that border, that equator, on September 21st, it can be a real time of depression for me. I have to watch that. I have to be careful of that. I know from observing my cycle, that's the time when I have to chop wood. I have to get the wood ready for the wood stove and all that kind of stuff. But I also know I have to prepare myself for that time between September 21st and December 21st. And that's just me. Every man would be different. But the important thing to know is that if you're in a relationship as a male-female relationship, or even if there's another style of relationship, it's important to observe the cycle of your partner so that you can get to know them. And the last cycle of time, of course, the fourth cycle is the life. The 6 ceremonies of life. There's birth ceremony, coming of age, becoming an adult, becoming an elder, the funeral ceremony, and the memorial ceremony. 6 ceremonies of life. And it came to me in my life as a singer to be involved in many of these. Singing is my path of service. And I told my daughters, the greatest thing you can find in your life, the greatest possession you can have, is your path of service to others. And the best path of service to others that you can have is a path of service where you use your gift. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that. But having looked at that, just briefly mention the 4 cycles of time, it's very important to understand that each human being is unique, and as an individual person, by looking at the way time cycles for us, we can understand ourselves. And in some sense, that's the only thing we're doing here in this world, is coming to understand ourselves. Another concept we have that we use at the Healing Center a lot is the concept of the four doorways: mind, the heart, the body, the spirit. For an illness to come to a human being, it has to come through one of these doorways. And fasting can help with each of them. So what I'm going to do this morning, for a little bit of time that I have with you, we're going to talk about some of these doorways and how fasting affects that doorway. If there's a blockage in any one of these doorways, the sickness can manifest from that. If you have a physical blockage, that's a blood clot. That's a critical emergency. But you can also have a mental blockage. You can also have an emotional blockage. You can also have a spiritual blockage, and they might not be as immediate, but they still do have a big effect on our lives. And often when working with the clients, I've been working with the clients at the Healing Center for 43 years. I've sat down with many of the 14,000 people who come there seeking to change their lives. And one of the things I tell them, that it's really easy to tell if you have a blockage in one of your 4 doorways. It's very easy, just one question: are you doing art? If you're not doing art, you're blocked, because human beings are artists. Human beings are naturally creative. You bring a bunch of 3-year-olds in here and say, don't write on the walls, and leave them alone for a couple hours, come back, you'll have art. You cannot stop children from doing art. Children will do art when they go to the bathroom. My grandson did the other day, and I could have said, oh man, grandson, you made a mess. Or I could say, hey, grandson, hey, you're doing art. I don't want to stop his art. Many of us have been hurt. You have to hurt a human being terribly to stop them from being an artist. And many of us have been hurt in the schools that we went to, and I was hurt in the school that I went to. You know, And that art stopped for a long time. So if art is coming back into your life, when we have clients at the center and art is starting again, they want to paint, they want to carve, they want to do something, they want to carve some cedar, we take that as a really good sign that healing is happening. If you used to do art and you stopped somehow, usually if you examine that, you'll find that there was a hurt. And if you just start doing the art again, or maybe you have a feeling that you want to do some kind of art, just engaging in art itself is part of a healing process, can be a healing process to remove a blockage. In the physical doorway, when we think about fasting, we actually fast every night. And we, of course, in the morning, we break the fast with breakfast. And the reason why this is very important is that, and here's, they say if you take a college class and you remember one thing that professor said 15 years later, that was a really good class. So in terms of this talk, this is one of the major sentences of the day with regard to fasting and health. When the stomach is full, or when there's anything in the stomach, the primary energy of the body goes to digesting food. As soon as the stomach is empty, the primary energy of the body goes to healing the body. Once the stomach is empty, the body starts saying, hey, what's happening in my liver? What's happening in my kidneys? How is my pancreas doing? What's this mucus in my lungs? Oh, look, here's a cancer cell. I'm going to deal with that. Stomach's empty. I can deal with that now. So what does this mean? It means the stomach is very important. The stomach is like a stove. I don't know if you were raised, but I was raised with a wood stove. And it wasn't a good one. It was one of those really cheap ones, just made out of tin. I don't know if you've ever built a fire in one of those cheap tin stoves, but if you get the fire going too much, it starts sounding like a locomotive. It starts sucking for air, and it's fire is really going. It starts turning red. The stove itself actually turns red. You can light your cigarette on that, baby. But of course, I don't smoke. But the point here is this: your stomach is the same thing. Now, what happens if you put too much wood in the stove? The stomach starts belching. Not the stomach, but if you put too much wood in the stove starts belching. It's gasping for air. So here's the deal. If you want to be a healthy human being, never eat until you're stuffed. And when I was growing up and I was hungry all the time, I'm not just talking about being hungry. I mean, I was malnourished. I was so malnourished, I grew 4 inches after high school. 4 inches after high school. I was having a hard time even growing. But anyway, so I said to myself when I was young, man, if I ever get money, I'm going to eat. And I'm going to eat just before I go to bed. I'm not going to bed hungry. If I ever get any money at all, I'm not going to bed hungry. But that's not healthy. I've had to change my ways as an older person. And you never want to eat until you're totally stuffed. As good as it feels. I know it feels good. It feels good for me. I like to do it too, but I don't do it anymore because I want to be healthy. Your stomach functions best when it's about 1/3 water, digestive juices, 1/3 food, and 1/3 air. If you get 75% food in your stomach, and then it's going to have a little water and very little air, you're not going to digest your food very good, and then it's going to go into your intestines, not digested. And intestines are the root of your health. Here's an interesting thing. I was in a coffee house at UBC before I retired. I got in a conversation one day with a geneticist. And I heard the phrase all my relations, as we all have many times. And it's a beautiful gift from the Lakota people, this concept of all my relations. Beautiful gift for me. And I was actually in a room, a Facebook room of Cherokee speakers, language speakers last year, and we started discussing is there an all my relations in the Cherokee language? And there's not. So it's a real blessing that the Lakota people have brought that. And the fluent language speaker says that the closest thing that Cherokees have is we're all children of one creator. That would be maybe the closest phrase that we would have that would come to all my relations. I started talking to this geneticist, and I was so astounded by what he told me that I asked him to repeat it twice. Are you sure? We share 80% DNA with a cedar tree. If I could tweak your DNA 20%, you'd be a tree. You know, we breathe out oxygen. Trees breathe in the carbon dioxide. We breathe out carbon dioxide, and the trees breathe it in and give us back oxygen. Our lungs are shaped like trees, and the roots of our intestines, if you were to become a tree, your intestines would be your roots. And what happens to a tree if the roots are not healthy? The tree is not healthy. You gotta have healthy roots. And to have healthy intestines, you gotta have a healthy stomach. To have a healthy stomach, you have to eat properly. So it means too, another important thing about this, because when the stomach is empty, you start healing yourself. Another important thing about this is you don't want to eat a big meal just before bedtime. And I know I like to do that too. I try not to. Most days I'm successful. Some nights I give in and have a little piece of toast. I try not to do that because I want my stomach to be empty. My wife has a thing where she eats 8 hours a day and does not eat for 16. So she quits eating at midnight, at 6 in the evening, and doesn't start eating again until 10 the next morning. So she's allowing her stomach to be empty 16 hours a day for her health and healing. And so that's one of the powerful things about fasting. And then today we're on a no water, no food fast, but if you, one of the things I like to say is that the human body can do a lot with a little, but it can't do anything with nothing. But what I mean by that is water is the first medicine. Food is our second medicine. And the herbs and herbal medicine teas that we have are our third medicine. So the first medicine is water. And one of the things I'll say now, in case I don't get a chance to say it to you again later, is when I went to fast, and for instance, like Bear Butte, South Dakota, where Crazy Horse fasted and where Sitting Bull fasted, I've fasted there a number of times. And I went up on the mountain under a couple of different elders. When you come down and they have the last day of your, you come down from when your fast is over, you enter this, first thing you do is go into the sweat lodge for a little sweat. And the elder gives you one swallow of water. And you can just feel the tremendous energy from that one swallow of water. When you break your fast today, you might be, we're going to be breaking it with, I think, water and berries. But before you eat the berries, allow yourself to feel the energy that's in just one swallow of water. And you can say to that swallow of water, you know, go to the part of my body, if there's any part of my body that needs healing. Water is so powerful. You know, one of the things I do, and one of my art form in my life is I happen to make pottery. And I like to tease people and tell them I'm a pot dealer. I sell pots. I just did a pot show in Vancouver. Okay, I see a couple of people smiling. This is a tough room. Oh, but anyway, I recently got some clay that I had at another place, been setting for 25 years. Hard as a rock. If I put that clay in a plastic bag, 25 pounds of clay, and I put 1 cup of water inside that bag, and I seal it tightly, and I put that bag in a pail of water so that the water goes clear around the bag, so that it disperses the water inside the bag along all the surfaces of the clay. The next day, in 24 hours, that clay will be so soft, I can make a pot out. If I put 2 cups of water, that 25 pounds of clay would just be mush. That's how powerful water is. And we have 3 trillion cells in our body, and everyone needs water. And when cells divide, they need water to divide properly. And if they divide improperly, you might get a cancer cell. That's why I keep a cup on my kitchen counter at all times, 24 hours a day, so that when I walk into the kitchen, I would see that cup and I would drink water. I drink water as much as I can during the day. Water is very important. And if you're fasting and your body is in a healing mode, and maybe you have a certain illness in your body, and you take water, but also take it with a medicine, take it with a certain kind of tea, say juniper tea, for instance. At a time when your body is in that healing state, the stomach is empty. When you use that medicine, just a little bit of medicine will go a long ways to bring you health and healing. And while I'm on this subject, and having been director of the indigenous garden at UBC Farm, where I had 68 medicinals, I had 68 medicines. All were native medicines except for comfrey. Comfrey actually comes from Europe. It's good for the bones. It's called bone knit in Old English. But that's the only European medicine I had, but the elders use it so much. And part of our thing with the garden was we had an elders medicine collective, and the elders used the medicines. And during that time, I also was doing some work with the Alternative Care Cancer Clinic at Vancouver General Hospital, and who help patients who are maybe undergoing cancer treatment or have possibly they're doing chemo or radiation, but they have alternative health care, alternative cancer healing that integrates with chemo and radiation. That's an amazing place. It's called Inspire Health. Anybody can go there. And one of the things I learned there is that blueberries are very good medicine. I many evenings I eat a little 8 or 10 blueberries as a medicine to myself, especially before I go to bed. But here's the thing: blueberries are intelligent. All plants are intelligent. All plants have intelligence. All animals have intelligence. Blueberry has intelligence. And that's why if you want to use a blueberry as a healing medicine, it has to be organic. Because if you put a pesticide on a blueberry, a crop of blueberries, the thing that is the healing medicine in the blueberry is the chemical that the blueberry uses to protect itself from bugs, from blight, from fungus, and things like that. If you put a pesticide on a blueberry crop and you continue that for 3 or 4 years, by the 3rd or 4th year, the blueberries are already going to have figured out, I don't need this internal medicine anymore. I got this pesticide. And it starts to shut down to as low as 20% of its healing energy. So if I'm going to use blueberries as a medicine, as a food, which is medicine, you have to have organic food. I know it's expensive. I'm not a rich guy, but I buy very expensive blueberries. I paid $14 the other day for just like a little package of blueberries. But they're important medicine to me. Another thing that fasting does in the physical doorway is it relieves stress. Working with the Alternative Care Cancer Clinic, one of the things I really realized from that work there was the incredible role that stress plays in illness. And fasting eases your physical stress. It also eases your emotional self. It eases your thought process. And it eases your spiritual presence. And stress is a very important, very, very important aspect of almost every illness. And so here's an interesting thing to know. You may already know that there are 6 muscle structures in your face. You have 6 different sets of muscles on your face. And it takes all 6 to smile. And the heart reads muscle tone to decide what chemicals, and the heart has over 1,400 biochemical realities it can introduce into the bloodstream. So one example of that, for instance, is adrenaline. Adrenaline If your heartbeat goes up 1 or 2 beats a minute, the heart may read that and pump adrenaline into your bloodstream. Adrenaline, cortisol, maybe. The guy comes into a room where you're at right now with a gun. Adrenaline might be the biochemical reality in your bloodstream that you want. But if you're in a peaceful state and you're having adrenaline in your bloodstream, and this is a case with a lot of our people who exist in constant states of anger, fear, and grief. People that have adrenaline pumping as a result of multi-generational trauma. And the thing about having adrenaline pumping in your system is you get a pear-shaped body, and I have a pear-shaped body. I'm coming out of multi-generational trauma. I sometimes point at my stomach when I'm with the clients and say, this is the fear of my father. This is the fear of my grandfather. This is the fear of my great-grandfather. The truth is in our bodies. The truth of our generations writes itself upon our physical self. And so when you fast, it relieves that stress. So here's an interesting thing about smiling. If you're really having a bad day and you start smiling, the heart can't differentiate between a real smile and a fake smile. It starts putting better stuff in the bloodstream. Pretty soon you feel better. So you can't fake it till you make it. So here's a sentence I share with the client sometimes. Voice tone affects muscle tone. Muscle tone affects your heart choice. Your heart choice creates the reality of your bloodstream. The reality of your bloodstream determines the health of your kidneys, your pancreas, your liver, your gallbladder, all the organs and cells of your body. So voice is very important. When I was studying with I had a wonderful elder, that I've been so blessed in my life that everywhere I went, elders seemed to want to teach me. And when I was a young man, and I was always taken in and never seemed to ever be rejected. And I really had a lot of wonderful teachers and interactions with a lot of elders. But my main elder that I really learned to sweat from, he always encouraged me to come to a sweat. Finally, I was about probably 18 or 19 when I went over to become a sweat, to go to a sweat. And he would always say, come to my sweat, come to my sweat. And I didn't understand what come to my sweat meant. Now, I found out though, when I got there, that come to my sweat meant chop wood. I had to chop wood for almost a year before I got into sweat. But anyway, the important thing is that your heart energy, to reduce your stress, by fasting, you reduce your stress a little bit, relax yourself, to change your voice tone. I've changed my tone in my life. I've changed my tone to such an extent that when I speak to my children, who are all grown up now, and so when I speak to my grandchildren, when I speak to my daughters who know me well, I think the last year my youngest daughter lived with me, 3 times I apologized for the wrong tone. I said, oh, my girl, Daddy didn't mean to say that to you like that. That was a wrong tone of voice. I'm going to say that same sentence to you again with a better tone of voice. I want to atone. Atonement at 1 month. My grandfather, my mother's father, said, we are sound. The essence of a human being is sound. When you reduce and everything else is gone, what is left is sound. And that's the nature of our spirit, is sound. So sound is very important. I want my heartbeat to be healthy. I know from some of the recent scientific work, and if you're interested in this kind of thing, one of the scientists that's really up on this kind of heart research is named Damasio. You can read these books if you want. There's another great book called The Heart Code that talks about heart energy. And I know that the energy of our hearts goes out about 8 feet. I do a lot of my professional work is in the emotional development of children. I do a lot of pro-D days, even though I'm retired, with school systems, helping teachers change their lesson plans so that they would be a little more oriented to developing emotional skill and emotional competency in the classroom and emotional health. By teaching children how to identify and communicate emotions and how to gain emotional skill. And the difference between driving down the road and road rage is emotional skill. Some people do not have the emotional skill to not go into road rage. And I don't want to be like that. And so I've changed the tone of my life. By changing my voice tone, I changed my muscle tone. I consciously relax myself. I train myself to take deep breaths during the day. Relax. And fasting does that even more so. It helps you to relax. It helps you to de-stress. It helps to clean your body on the physical level. Keep our body clean. Think of the room that you're in. If you swept the floor and you brought all the little dirt and dust, maybe a little piece of paper here and there or something out to the center of the room, but you left it there overnight. Next morning you walk around, stuff goes back out on the floor. Next day you sweep the floor again. There'd be a little more stuff there, a little more garbage. What if you did that for 40 years? You know, there would be so much garbage in the room. There's so much stuff to sweep up. It's the same. When you get up in the morning, break the fast with water. There's another really important sentence, and I told my girls, I said, this may be the most healing piece of information I can share with you from our culture. When you get up in the morning, drink water. Give your body some water to wash out what has been cleaned the night before, because when your body is fasting, it's cleaning. And just before you go to sleep, drink water. Give your body a little water to use during the night to clean yourself, clean your internal being. And you can tell how clean you are when you get up in the morning by sticking your tongue out and looking at it. Is it clear? Is it pink? Is it got a nice color? No yucky stuff on it? If it's got yucky stuff on it, fasting's a good idea, because by fasting, each of us now that are fasting, our body is cleaning itself a little bit more because our stomach is empty. Body's going to the kidneys, it's going to the pancreas, it's going to the liver. Something needs to be, is there a toxin here that needs to be taken out? Then you get up in the morning, instead of, if you have coffee or tea, even that, it won't be the same. It has to be water. If you get up in the morning and right away you eat breakfast, all that stuff goes back into your system. The next night, your body once again tries to bring it out. You got to help your body by giving it that water in the morning. That's one of the most healing things you can do, is to break the fast of the night with water. And if you want to, you can face the east. If you want to face a direction that's significant, and that's very important, because meaning brings health. When I had the youth program at the UBC farm, and I was bringing, as I mentioned, children in care, children under the care of Vancouver Aboriginal Family Services Program. And for some of these children in care, they've been born in the city and they've been in care their whole life, and some of them have never interacted with the Native community. This was their first interaction with the Native community and with the elder circle that worked at the farm. And the first thing I would do when they came to the farm is I would take them over to a stand of juniper. I'd say, this is juniper. I would say, anybody know what this tree is? And over the years, the 350 or so youth I brought to the farm, not one youth could identify one tree. Not one youth could identify one tree. I wanted to make sure that by the time they left, they knew what juniper was. Juniper is a medicine. It kills germs. It's our first bath. I recently helped on a birth at Children's Hospital in Vancouver. And my wife and I brought a gallon of juniper tea there to bathe that child with its first bath, a traditional bathing ceremony. And I recently told my children, they asked me, Dad, what do you want for your funeral? I said, well, I hope I get that juniper bath, wash my body with juniper, girls. If you can do that for me, that'd be good. Put on some nice clothes, cowboy boots, and but I was really happy that my children felt comfortable enough with me to be able to ask me that question. But the important thing here is that every time we'd walk by the farm, I'd walk by the farm with some of the children. I'd say, "What's that tree?" "Juniper." "What's it good for?" "Kills germs for the rest of their life." Juniper will have meaning. I made sure they learned something about pine and the medicine of pine, something about fir and the medicine of fir, something about balsam and the medicine of balsam. They're able to identify cedar and all the medicines of cedar and the incredible medicines of the birch tree. Birch tree may be the most healing tree in the world. The incredible medicine in the birch tree. Every single part of the birch tree has medicine. So for the rest of their life, when they see these trees, they will have meaning, and meaning brings health. Meaninglessness brings sickness. So if I'd been with you this morning when you started your fast, I would say to you, dedicate your fast to something that means something to you. Generally, we're dedicating our fast to end violence against women, and that means a lot to me. In the heart doorway, it's the same thing. When you stop eating, when you start fasting, the energy of your emotion. Next time you get really, really angry at something, if that happens to you, stop eating. I guarantee you, within a day, you won't be so angry. Fasting calms the emotions. Fasting can change anger into peacefulness, can change fear into courage, can change grief into healing calm. It's very important. It can heal the heart doorway. Sometimes people have a blockage in their heart. A blockage in the heart is an emotion or a feeling you can't share with anyone else. I've had lots of clients that have had these emotional secrets they can't tell anyone. And by fasting, we can rise. Last night at the Longhouse gathering, Chief Bobby Joseph said, we need to raise the level of humanity, all of us together as one people. And that's one thing that fasting can help us do. It can help us move towards emotional health and wellness. And just as a person involved in this field, and this is kind of off the subject, just let me share with you that a lot of what people talk about mental illness problems in our communities, they're not mental illness problems. Some are, but I feel myself that most of them are emotional illness problems. They're not actually a mental illness, they're an emotional illness. But I just give you that to think about. You can think about that. I know that I've got 15 minutes. I'm going to speed up here. It's the same thing in the mind. People have what I call the big secret. They have thoughts that they can't share. The mind is not circulating. The mind becomes, the heart is the root of the mind. And when there's grief and sorrow and fear in the heart, it creates a blockage not only in the heart, but it also affects the mind. The thinking of the mind becomes patterned. Sometimes you have people in your life that every time you meet them, they tell you the same story. I've got an uncle. Every time I meet him, you know what the band council is doing now? You know what those guys are doing? I can tell you, he's going to talk to me about a half an hour. I can tell you every word he's going to say before he starts, because it's always the same. Because his mind, the creative thinking of his mind has been stopped by the hurt he went through as a human being. And I just become a counselor and listen to that hurt, maybe bring a little bit of it out. But in the little time I have left, I want to talk about the spirit. Some of you may know that, and one thing I believe strongly in, paraphrasing the words of the Peacemaker, I mentioned I'm a Cherokee, and Cherokees are the southernmost Iroquois tribe. I'm very close to the Longhouse teachings. And all violence is a failure to use our good mind, to think our way to peace. All violence is a failure to use our heart to feel our way to peace. Our violence is a failure to use our voice. I had a senior moment. I forgot back there what I was going to share. My sweat house teacher had me do. He had me fast from words. Not only are you fasting a day with no food, before you put food in your body, you're probably going to think twice about how good that food is. Fasting enough can cause you to have a better diet because you start really thinking about, what am I putting in my body? My sweat house teacher had me fast from words, to take a vow of silence. And that is a powerful thing. 1 day vow of silence. You can't speak for 1 day. You cannot utter a word. And when you do start talking again, it improves your words because as I told my daughters, your words make your life. You want to change your life, change your words. Words are very important. Don't swear and things like that. Don't use bad words. Don't use words to put other people down. Don't use judgmental words. Be careful with the words that you have. Try to have good words because it is through the power of the good mind, the power of the good heart, the power of the good voice, we can bring violence to an end. And other than violence, I just throw this out because if you're not mad at me already, this should do it. Other than violence against women, if I could end violence in one place in the Canadian society, it would be in hockey. Just think what a different country it would be if no hockey player in Canada anywhere would even dream of doing violence to someone else. You know, that would be a wonderful thing. And I have heard recently that one of the hockey clubs or something back east put in a no tolerance policy for violence on the ice. Oh man, I said, hey, that's the right step in the right direction. But another thing about fasting that's very important in the few minutes I have left, I want to mention. Fasting is one of the ways that we find our gift, especially the spiritual fasting of sitting on the mountain. Each of us was born with something, or as my sweat house teacher's helper said, no one is born with nothing. Each of us was sent to this world through the agreement of our ancestors. And through the agreement of our ancestors, each of us brings something. You are my gifts. I am your gift. No one's born an enemy, but everyone is born a gift. Everybody has something. My dad said some people have great gifts and some people have smaller gifts, but it's not important how great or small your gift is. Important is that you use your gift and use it wisely for the benefit and blessing of people around you. And so here's one of the things I like to share with the young men that come to the treatment center. A man's gift is always on his feminine side. A woman's gift, and maybe exception, but I don't know of any. A woman's gift is almost always on her man's side. Therefore, as young men, I say to you that however you conduct yourself with women, that will be your relationship with your gift, the essence of your life. Your gift creates meaning, movement, and purpose in life. When I was sitting with my singing teacher one time from Fort Peck, Montana, and one of the reasons why he was my singing teacher is because my grandmother's brother moved there in the early 1900s, and my family's had a 5-generation relationship with Fort Peck. My grandmother's brother's buried there on that reservation. Sitting with my singing teacher, Dale, from Poplar, Montana, and he said, Lee, he said, look, they pulled some grass up and they threw the grass up in the wind, and the grass blew in the wind, and he pointed at the grass and he said, that's how the Indians are becoming. And he pushed his finger into the red dirt and he said, we're losing the root of our existence, and the root of our existence is the knowledge that we have a gift. He said, Lee, you're going to meet men in your life that won't know why they were born. You must tell them why they were born. You were born because you have a gift, because you bring something to this world. 30 years later, I was counseling a guy at Round Lake, native man, middle age, said he didn't like himself. Said he hated himself. Told me he had actually shot himself. So when he held the gun out and shot himself, he saw the bullet come out of the gun in slow motion. And it took quite a while, he said, for that bullet to get from the gun to him. And during that time, he said, I want to live. He realized after he pulled the trigger, he wanted to live. He said, man, I don't know why I was born. And I remembered Dale's words. You'll meet men that don't know why they were born. And so I say to young men, my uncle in Oklahoma, Uncle Elwood, said to me, if a man hits a woman, he has hit his gift. If a woman hits a man, she has lessened her gift. You may still have a great gift, but if you ever hit a man or a woman, really anybody really, you've lessened what your gift might have been. The gift that ancestors gave to you to bring here to help me. You're my helpers, you know. And it must have been and yeah, it's probably why in the old days we had no sickness, because everybody knew their gifts. I do a workshop on great native parenting, and I tell the young parents when I'm talking to them that these days it's a duty of a parent to try to see their child's gift so they can get the child some training for the gift. And the fifth area that fasting is really good for, and I think I have like 5 minutes left. Between the heart and the mind, and the body and the spirit, in a place that would be very close to the place where our voice is, we have what we call, in terms of medicine wheel teachings, volition, our will. Our will is a capacity to set a goal, to achieve the goal, and to set a new goal. And fasting strengthens your will. Set the goal of, I'm not fasting for 1 day. I'm not fasting for 4 days. Don't go beyond 4 days unless you're under an elder, somebody that knows what they're doing about fasting. I have done more than 4 days, but I would never do for more than 4 days. Even at my age now, I would probably still go to an elder, you know, because there's so many toxins in our body. People don't die of starvation. You hear people get lost in wilderness. They died 4 days in starvation. They didn't die of starvation. They died of all the toxins that was coming out of their kidneys and liver and pancreas that come back into the bloodstream. They die of their own poisons they're carrying in their own body, really. You won't starve to death in 4 days. Nobody would starve to death in 4 days. But people died of toxicity. And by fasting, you reduce that toxicity. Have a clean tongue in the morning. And coming out of the violence of an alcoholic home and, you know, seeing the depravity and things that happen. I mean, I was in the room when people lost their lives. I've seen a pretty heavy violence. And to talk to people that have been through that violence and say purity is a goal in life. To be a pure person, to have a pure mind, can be a goal in life, you know. And some of the guys that come to the treatment center are coming off the streets of East Vancouver, and I know where they've been because I've been there. I can see looks on their faces when I start talking about purity as a goal in life. They're thinking, man, one guy told me one time, what planet are you from? But when he came back 5 years later with 5 years sobriety, he said, hey, I'm doing that stuff now. So he said, I never heard anybody talk like you. So anyway, use this fasting time to get in touch with the cycles of time that you're in, with your inner self and the relationship between your inner self and that outer time. Use it to reposition your life towards peace and away from violence. It's scary to be nonviolent. You know, I've been in situations where I was a nonviolent person in a violent place. You know, that can be a scary thing. And so I think there's 4 minutes if I don't know.
You have some questions, yeah.
What's one of the questions?
So the first question is, what kinds of water, they were talking about, if there's purifying water, like having Brita, that kind of thing. Is there different, better types of water?
Yeah. You ever see that movie, The Cherokee Word for Water? About what's her name? That where they brought water to a Cherokee community. Anyway, I should remember that name. I have an ancestor by that same name, but I can't remember it right now. But anyway, the point is this: is that there's many kinds of water. In Cherokee, there's Ama, there's a Meru, there's Udali, there's Iguanada, there's Oska. Those are just 5 types of water right there, and there's many more. The best water you can have for healing and to break a fast and to drink in the morning is water that comes from a spring in the high mountains. Pure water. Pure water. And there are places, there's one by, you know, there's a lot of flooding by Cache Creek right now. There's a place by Cache Creek that's considered a very sacred place, pretty much not known to the public. It's a place where hot and cold water flows out of the same rock. That's considered to be a healing place. Any place there's hot and cold water together is a healing place and a healing water. But the more pure the water that you have, the better. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't have minerals in it. And I use a filter in the house. I use a water filter. We live in a place where there's a lot of iron. There's a lot of manganese in the water. So we purify it a bit. It's very hard water. But there used to be a place that I went near Vernon, where I live, Vernon, British Columbia, to get water. And now somebody has bought the property and changed it into a business, and you can still get water there, but you have to put a loonie into this little thing, then the water comes out for like 10 seconds. And so you have to actually pay for the water. I remember I used to go there with the elders when I was younger, and we used to just get water there. We get water for the sweat. If we're gonna have a sweat, we get a few pails of water from the spring and use that for the sweat. Use that for breaking fast and for medicine teas. It's probably still good, but you have to pay for it. And I think because you have to pay for it, I think it's probably not quite as good. But if you can find a spring or a spring water, that's the best water that you can get. The more pure the water, the better. And, you know, water responds to your thought. Before I drink my water in the morning, sometimes I start singing. I sing for a while. Maybe I say a prayer. Like I mentioned, I face the east. That's one of the really important things about making sure that your children have at least some knowledge of the directions, east, south, north, and west, because it means that when they look in that direction, it'll have meaning. As we mentioned earlier, meaning brings health. So by drinking water in relationship to the east, I not only am getting the healing power of water, but I'm also getting meaning. And meaning is in life is very important. The essence of the meaning of our life is our movement towards our gift.
There's a couple more questions and we'll try and get through two more.
Okay.
The second one
Is from earlier in your talk when you talked about cycles. And the question is, how do you find your cycle?
How to find your cycle?
yeah, how to find the cycle.
Well, the cycle exists. I mean, the year exists, the movement of the sun, the movement of the moon. You don't find your cycle, you observe your cycle. It's already there. You observe it by what happens to you at different times of the year. Start paying attention when you're going around the sun cycle. And of course, although grandfather sun is a teacher of men and grandmother moon is a teacher of women, men are affected by the moon too, and women are affected by the sun as well. But the point is just to observe it. You don't have to find it, it's there. You observe it and observe your life. That's one of the wonderful things that we have. You know, just think about, in terms of everything that's been said here today, how wonderful a sweat is. Where you have the earth, you have the water, you have the air, you have the fire. You know, and our elders tell us that the trees eat sunlight. And when you burn the trees to make the sweat rocks gather the sunlight. As they gather the sunlight, they turn to the redness of the sun. We bring the redness of the sun into our sweat lodge and we sit in front of it, and close to the redness of the rocks is our solar plexus. Our solar plexus, you know, sun center of ourself. And so, can I answer that question? You just observe your cycles. You can't find them. They're just there. You have to start watching them and get to know yourself.
I think that's a great answer.
The last
Last question, and we just barely have time for it, but I'm going to ask it because it's a really good one.
when
On fasting, someone said that they feel a deep kind of sadness.
is there a practice for that?
When sadness creates a sadness, when fasting creates sadness.
Mhm.
Well, I think that goes to the fact that fasting does heal your emotions. The sadness is there. You know, before you start fasting, when you start fasting, it comes to you're getting in touch with that feeling. I would advise to experience it, to be sad. If you want to cry, go ahead and cry. You know, let the sadness out. The fasting will lessen the sadness of it by itself. Observing it will help to lessen it. And when you break the fast, you may have become aware that you have this sadness and maybe need to do something about it, get counseling or engage in something that helps you with your sadness.